Free Nnamdi Kanu now! 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 Free Nnamdi Kanu now!
It started like a whisper in Abuja. One man's call for justice. He wasn't a member of IPOB, yet his voice lit up social media overnight. By morning, hundreds had gathered at the heart of Nigeria's capital, demanding the release of Nnamdi Kanu, a name that still divides a nation. Police trucks rolled in. Tear gas filled the air. Cameras caught chaos, confusion, and courage, all unfolding live. But here's the question everyone's asking. Why does Nnamdi Kanu's detention still ignite protests, even from people outside his own movement? Do you believe this is about justice, politics, or something deeper in Nigeria's history? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'll be replying to the most insightful ones. Your opinion could shape the next story we tell. To understand why this single protest shook Abuja, we need to go back to who Nnamdi Kanu really is, and how his voice became one of the most controversial in Nigeria's modern history. Before the protests, before the prison walls, there was just a man. Nnamdi Kanu, born in Ijeama Afra Ukwu, near Umuahia in Abia State, southeastern Nigeria. He studied political economy at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, but later moved to the United Kingdom, where his voice began to take a different path. From a small studio in London, Kanu founded Radio Biafra, a platform that gave millions of southeastern Nigerians a voice they felt they'd lost. His broadcast spoke of marginalization, identity, and a call for self-determination. To some, he became a symbol of resistance. To others, a threat to national unity. In 2012, he helped form the indigenous people of Biafra IPOB, pushing for the re-establishment of Biafra decades after the Civil War. His speeches were fiery, his following grew quickly, and soon, the name Nnamdi Kanu was echoing from Lagos to London. But every rise has a turning point. In 2015, Kanu was arrested by the Nigerian government on charges including treasonable felony, a move that set off protests across the southeast and parts of the diaspora. After months in detention, he was released on bail in 2017. Yet his message and the movement only grew louder. Then came June 2021. Kanu was rearrested and brought back to Nigeria in what his supporters call a controversial rendition. Since then, he's remained in custody, his trial drawing global attention, and his name continuing to spark both hope and hostility. Who is Nnamdi Kanu? To some, a freedom fighter. To others, a disruptor. But one thing is certain, his story changed the conversation about identity, justice, and belonging in Nigeria. From a single voice in exile to a movement that could no longer be ignored. When Nnamdi Kanu began broadcasting on Radio Biafra, few expected his words to travel beyond a small circle of listeners in the United Kingdom. But within months, those signals reached deep into southeastern Nigeria, into homes, buses, and market stalls, carrying a message that many said spoke their truth. Kanu's voice became sharp, direct, sometimes defiant. He spoke of neglect, political imbalance, and a call for dignity for his people. Social media amplified that voice. Every broadcast clip, shared, debated, dissected, turned him from an activist abroad into a symbol of rebellion at home. In 2012, the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, began organizing openly. Peaceful marches, online campaigns, flags raised once again. Support swelled, students, traders, diaspora communities, all rallying behind the idea that Biafra was not forgotten. But with prominence came pressure. the Nigerian government accused Kanu and his group of inciting division, labeling IPOB's activities as a threat to national security. In 2015, everything changed. Kanu entered Nigeria and was arrested in Lagos by security forces. His supporters flooded the streets demanding his release. The name Nnamdi Kanu became headline news. From radio waves to courtrooms. From quiet conviction to a national confrontation. That was the moment Nnamdi Kanu's voice stopped being just a broadcast and became a movement. Every movement meets resistance, and for Nnamdi Kanu, that moment came fast. By 2015, his words had reached every corner of Nigeria's southeast. Supporters called him the voice of a forgotten people. Authorities called him a threat to national unity. His broadcasts from Radio Biafra criticized government policies, questioned leadership, and revived conversations many believed were long buried after the Civil War. Then it happened. In October 2015, Nnamdi Kanu was arrested in Lagos by security agents. The charges: treasonable felony, sedition, and incitement. To his supporters, it was a political arrest. To the government, it was the law taking its course. Protests erupted across Abia, Enugu, Anambra, and parts of River State. Streets filled with chants of "Free Nnamdi Kanu." Security forces responded. Videos of clashes spread online, deepening national tension. Months turned into years of legal battles, hearings delayed, emotions rising. International human rights groups began to take notice. Amnesty International raised concerns about alleged excessive force during pro-Biafra protests. The United Nations called for restraint and dialogue. Yet inside Nigeria, the divide only grew wider. Supporters saw Kanu as a symbol of courage. Critics accused him of provoking unrest. And through it all, Kanu remained defiant, speaking through his lawyers and through every headline that carried his name. It was no longer just a man versus the state. It had become a movement versus the system. October 2015, the day Nnamdi Kanu's voice went silent. He had arrived in Nigeria quietly, no fanfare, no cameras. But within days, he was picked up by security agents in Lagos and transferred to Abuja. The charges were heavy: treasonable felony, sedition, and membership of an unlawful organization. To his supporters, he was a prisoner of conscience. To the authorities, a threat to the nation's peace. His detention sparked waves of protests across southeastern Nigeria. Crowds poured into the streets of Abia, Onitsha, and Umuahia, chanting his name, holding his photo high, demanding his release. Security forces pushed back. Reports of clashes, arrests, and casualties followed. Inside detention, Kanu was kept under tight security at Kuje Correctional Center in Abuja. His lawyers argued that his rights were being violated, that he had been denied fair trial and access to medical care. The case drew the world's attention. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch called for transparency and fair hearing. In April 2017, after nearly 2 years behind bars, Nnamdi Kanu was granted bail on medical grounds. When he stepped out of detention, the scene was electric. Thousands filled the streets, dancing, cheering, waving the Biafran flag. But for Kanu, freedom came with conditions. Restrictions on travel, speech, and gatherings. And as history would show, those conditions would not last long. From the walls of Kuje, Nnamdi Kanu had learned one thing: silence was never his strength. Freedom, but not silence. When Nnamdi Kanu walked out of Kuje prison in April 2017, it felt like a victory, not just for him, but for thousands who had waited, protested, and prayed. Crowds lined the streets of Umuahia, cheering his return. Flags waved, songs filled the air, and hope seemed to pulse through the southeast once more. But Kanu didn't fade quietly into the background. Within weeks, he returned to Radio Biafra, his voice stronger and sharper than before. He spoke about referendum, self-determination, and the right of the Igbo people to decide their future. His words went viral. Supporters called it awakening. Critics called it provocation. The Nigerian government watched closely. Tension rose. Rumors of another crackdown filled the air. By September 2017, the army launched Operation Python Dance 2, a military exercise aimed at curbing insecurity. But in reality, many saw it as a direct move against Kanu and the IPOB movement. Soldiers surrounded his home in Afraku, Umuahia. Gunfire was reported. Panic spread across social media. And then, he was gone. No one knew where Nnamdi Kanu was. His supporters claimed he had escaped. The government said nothing. For months, his absence fueled speculation, anger, and more protests. Yet his name refused to fade. They silenced the man, one supporter said, but not the message. In exile, his voice returned through social media and broadcasts. His followers grew beyond Nigeria, into the UK, the US, and across Africa. From prison walls to digital waves, Nnamdi Kanu had become more than a man. He was now a movement that refused to die. For almost 4 years, Nnamdi Kanu was a ghost. No one knew where he was, not his lawyers, not his followers. Some said he was in Israel. Others whispered the United Kingdom. Online, his voice resurfaced through live broadcasts. Calm, determined, distant. Then, in June 2021, the silence broke. The Nigerian government announced that Nnamdi Kanu had been rearrested and brought back to Nigeria. Details were murky. Officials said he was intercepted through international cooperation. But soon, reports emerged that Kanu was allegedly abducted in Kenya and forcibly returned to Nigeria. His legal team called it a violation of international law, an extraordinary rendition carried out without due process. Within hours, #FreeNamdiKanu trended again across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The global spotlight turned Ed to Abuja. He was held at the Department of State Services, DSS, headquarters, kept in solitary confinement under strict surveillance. His lawyers were allowed limited access. Human rights groups demanded answers. Even some lawmakers in the UK raised concerns, asking how a British citizen could be taken from one country to another without a court order. Inside Nigeria, emotions boiled over. Supporters saw the rearrest as persecution. Critics said it was justice finally catching up. Each court appearance drew massive security. Roads blocked, cameras flashing, tension thick in the air. How he was taken back remains a question many still ask. But one fact is clear. His return reignited a storm Nigeria thought had passed. The man who vanished in 2017 was back. And once again, the nation held its breath. It started as a call for justice, and by dawn, Abuja was awake again. Just Monday, the 20th of October, protesters flooded the streets near the Federal High Court, waving placards, chanting, "Free Nnamdi Kanu." The crowd wasn't just made up of IPOB members. It was ordinary Nigerians, activists, students, and human rights advocates, demanding fairness, transparency, and closure. The leader of the protest wasn't even part of IPOB. His name is Omoyele Sowore. He called it a march for justice, saying, "This is not about secession, it's about due process." Security presence was heavy. Police trucks lined the streets, armed officers watched closely. Tear gas was fired at one point, dispersing part of the crowd. Videos spread online. The chants, the chaos, the courage. And once again, Nnamdi Kanu's name filled every headline. Inside DSS custody, reports say he remains in solitary confinement. His lawyers continue to press for bail, citing his health and prolonged detention. Court hearings come and go, each one drawing new attention, new emotions, and new questions. Has justice been delayed or denied? The federal government maintains that the case must follow due process. IPOB insists it's persecution. Nigerians remain divided between those who see a patriot and those who see a provocateur. Yet one thing is certain: Nnamdi Kanu's story has become bigger than one man. It now speaks to the soul of a nation still wrestling with identity, unity, and truth. And as the protests continue in Abuja, the world is once again watching, waiting, to see how this chapter of Nigeria's history will end. So, what do you think? Is this about justice, politics, or something deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep this conversation alive, because the story of Nnamdi Kanu is still being written. When the streets fell silent, the internet came alive. Within hours of the protest, social media was flooded with clips, opinions, and questions. On Twitter, X, hashtags like #FreeNamdiKanu, #JusticeForAll, and #AbujaProtest dominated the timeline. Videos of protesters standing in tear gas, holding flags, were shared thousands of times, gathering millions of views in just a day. One user wrote, "Whether you support him or not, Nnamdi Kanu deserves a fair trial." Another replied, "This isn't about him, it's about the kind of country we want." From Lagos to Enugu, from Abuja to London, Nigerians weighed in, some with frustration, others with faith. Supporters saw the protest as a symbol of resistance, proof that Nigerians could still unite around the idea of justice. Critics, on the other hand, warned that agitation could reopen old wounds, urging dialogue over confrontation. Even among those who once disagreed with Kanu, a quiet consensus seemed to form. No one should be held without a fair and transparent trial. Human rights groups echoed that sentiment, calling for calm, accountability, and adherence to the rule of law. Across YouTube, podcasts, and street interviews, one question kept surfacing. What does this moment say about Nigeria? For some, it revealed strength, a new generation unafraid to speak truth to power. For others, it exposed pain, a reminder of promises still unfulfilled. But no matter the side, everyone agreed on one thing. Nnamdi Kanu's story is no longer just about one man. It's about justice, identity, and a nation still searching for balance. And in a country as vibrant and divided as Nigeria, that conversation is far from over. This story isn't just about Nnamdi Kanu anymore. It's about what his journey has come to represent, a reflection of how deeply Nigeria wrestles with justice, identity, and power. From the streets of Abuja to the corners of social media, the protest reignited old conversations. Who gets heard in Nigeria? Whose voices are silenced? The echoes of this moment stretch far beyond one courthouse or one leader. They speak to a generation that refuses to stay quiet, young Nigerians who have grown up watching history repeat itself and are now demanding something different. For some, Kanu symbolizes defiance. For others, he represents division. But at the center of it all lies one unshakable truth. People are still calling for fairness, for transparency, and for a country that listens. The Abuja protest reminded everyone that the fight for justice in Nigeria is no longer a regional cry. It's a national one. Activists, journalists, and everyday citizens now find themselves asking, If justice can't be fair to one man, can it be fair to all? This is the broader impact. Not just the protest or the prison cell, but the pulse of a nation deciding what kind of future it wants. Because in the end, every voice raised, in the streets or online, adds another line to Nigeria's ongoing story. And this story is still being written. Every story has two sides, but some stories echo far beyond the people inside them. The protest in Abuja wasn't just about one man in detention. It was a mirror reflecting how Nigerians still believe in the power of their voices. Nnamdi Kanu's name may divide opinion, but the principle behind the protest, justice, fairness, and freedom, unites far more people than it divides. Because at the end of the day, this story isn't about politics or power. It's about people who want to live in a country where truth doesn't depend on who's SPE. Aching it. Whether you agree with Kanu or not, one thing remains clear. Nigeria is still searching for justice that feels equal to everyone. And maybe that's what this moment is really about. A generation learning to ask louder, to question deeper, and to stand together for what's right. So, what do you think? Do these protests reflect progress or just history repeating itself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice is part of this story too. This is Crime Alive. Talk True Crime. We tell stories that matter, with facts that speak louder than fiction. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next story might just be the one that changes how you see everything.